In her work, The Ethics of Ambiguity, French philosopher Simone de Beauvoir explores an existentialist perspective on ethics, developed in collaboration with Jean-Paul Sartre. Departing from traditional ethical systems that rely on universal moral principles, existentialists argue that morality is a product of human experience and not an inherent aspect of the universe. De Beauvoir's approach begins with the fundamental concept of human freedom, asserting that it serves as the basis for all moral decision-making. The ethics of ambiguity is divided into 3 parts, each addressing different aspects of de Beauvoir's ethics of ambiguity. The first part delves into the philosophical foundations of this perspective, emphasizing the role of freedom in shaping morality. The second part explores the various ethical attitudes individuals can adopt based on their relationship with their freedom. Finally, de Beauvoir examines existentialism's insights into how individuals should interact with other human beings, offering guidance on ethical behavior in social contexts. In Part 1 of The Ethics of Ambiguity, de Beauvoir explores the concept of ambiguity in human experience. She highlights the paradoxical nature of our existence, such as the pursuit of goals, despite the certainty of death, and the simultaneous subjectivity and objectivity we experience in relation to others. While other philosophers have attempted to resolve this ambiguity by emphasizing immortality or the primacy of intentions, existentialism recognizes the impossibility of such resolutions. According to de Beauvoir, this acknowledgement of failure is the very reason why ethics is necessary to provide a meaningful framework for human striving. De Beauvoir summarizes Sartre's philosophy, arguing that individuals do not fail by falling short of their personal goals. Instead, they can find delight in the effort itself, embracing their ambiguity rather than despairing in it. Rather than aspiring to an unattainable moral perfection imposed by external systems of ethics, individuals should desire to authentically disclose themselves to be true to their own freedom and identity, rather than conforming to external values. Freedom, de Beauvoir asserts, is both the starting point and ultimate aim of ethics. While everyone possesses natural freedom, the task is to transform this innate freedom into genuine moral freedom by actively choosing to be free. This requires reflection on one's actions and the establishment of continuity between past, present, and future. De Beauvoir concludes this section by addressing moral evil, noting that while individuals cannot will themselves to be unfree, they can hinder their progress towards moral freedom by refusing to accept life's ambiguity or neglecting personal growth. Existentialism holds individuals wholly responsible for their actions, offering a more comprehensive account of good and evil that does not easily excuse selfishness or indifference to others. In Part 2, Personal Freedom and Others, de Beauvoir delves into the ways individuals can morally err, particularly when they fail to respect the freedom of others. She begins by depicting childhood as a period when individuals perceive fixed values and a separate world of play devoid of moral consequences. As adolescents, they awaken to the imperfect nature of adults, the relativity of values, and the moral and practical consequences of their actions. At this point, they must choose how to navigate their newfound freedom, whether to embrace moral responsibility or evade it. De Beauvoir identifies several flawed responses to this dilemma. The sub-man fears action and avoids responsibility by desiring to be an inanimate object. The serious man denies his freedom by adopting fixed values from external sources adhering to them loyally to avoid confronting the burden of independent thought. The nihilist acknowledges the absence of absolute moral values in the world, but sees it as tragic, rather than an opportunity to seize personal freedom and create one's own values. The adventurer, although embracing freedom, lacks genuine moral commitments and may trample on others' freedom for personal gain. Finally, the passionate person, while displaying sincere moral commitment, becomes enslaved by their intensity and sacrifices their own freedom when unable to achieve their goals. In the third part of The Ethics of Ambiguity, de Beauvoir delves into the relationship between an individual's freedom and the rest of humanity. She explores various implications of the interconnectedness of freedom. The first subsection critiques the aesthetic attitude, a detached perspective often adopted by intellectuals to evade their own concrete existence as free individuals. The second subsection examines the concept of freedom and liberation, particularly from an existentialist standpoint. De Beauvoir acknowledges that oppressed individuals may resort to negative revolt as a means to assert their freedom against oppressive forces. The freedom of the oppressed to pursue their chosen way of life without coercion is deemed meaningful, while the oppressor's freedom to deny others their freedom is deemed null and void. Oppressors often attempt to divert attention from the value of freedom by emphasizing other values, such as tradition or capitalism. However, de Beauvoir argues that tradition and capitalism only hold significance insofar as they promote freedom, reinforcing the idea that freedom is the fundamental objective of human action. In the third section, de Beauvoir addresses how the oppressed should act to secure their freedom. She contends that it may be necessary to perpetuate injustice in the fight against injustice. This can involve resorting to violence against those who contribute to oppression out of obligation or ignorance, or making choices between conflicting liberation struggles. Even sacrifices of comrades or oneself may be required in order to revolt against tyrants who deny freedom and reduce individuals to their factual conditions. Individuals must use the same tools and reduce both their enemies and themselves to facticity. De Beauvoir cautions that tyrants and revolutionaries who promise a better future through sacrifices make the same mistake as philosophers, who perceive ethics as an absolute rather than an embodiment of freedom in every action. Democracy, according to de Beauvoir, prioritizes the dignity of each individual and refuses to sacrifice anyone for an illusory future, as the struggle for freedom has no end. When choosing between two competing freedoms, the criterion should be the one that opens up more freedom in the future, illustrating why unjust revolution is preferable to unjust tyranny. In the fourth section, de Beauvoir explores the concept of the future, highlighting its divided nature. Individuals often envision the future as a continuation of the present, but also hope for a utopian future, devoid of any connection to the present, where ideal notions of glory, happiness, or justice materialize. The latter concept can lead people to sacrifice the present. Yet de Beauvoir argues that it is based on a false hope for perfection. She emphasizes the limitations of human striving and the perpetual existence of ambiguity. Politicians exploit people's wishful thinking and their yearning for ideals, promising a perfect future to instrumentalize them. De Beauvoir advocates celebrating existence, finite projects, and finite wills, instead of succumbing to the allure of infinity. In the final section, de Beauvoir delves deeper into ethical decision-making in the face of ambiguity. She asserts that decisions should aim at the freedom of the individual, and tolerate violence only when it opens up concrete possibilities for preserving freedom. She presents examples, such as the deceptive governance by the enlightened elites, claiming to act in the interest of colonial subjects while perpetuating oppression. The ethical stance, according to de Beauvoir, should be to act for the sake of freedom itself, other than attempting to civilize non-Europeans. The Soviet Union is also examined, with de Beauvoir acknowledging the ease with which goals of revolution can become excuses for oppression. She contends that it may be ethically justifiable to use violence and oppression to combat the same forces, although such a decision requires great responsibility, vigilance, and reflection. Criticism of politicians and revolutionaries is necessary, as they, too, must embrace resistance to their own ways to genuinely respect freedom. In a brief conclusion, de Beauvoir addresses existentialist ethics in relation to her critics and other ethical systems. While existentialism focuses on the individual, it recognizes that the freedom of others is essential for any individual's freedom. She challenges the notion of objective moral truth, asserting that meaning is derived from subjective human perspectives. De Beauvoir emphasizes that existentialism centers morality on concrete action and the pursuit of finite projects, affirming individuals' potential to make tangible contributions to the world and embrace their freedom. Ultimately, if everyone were to do so, the dream of a completely free utopia would no longer be necessary because it would be realized.